The Zabrak Sith named Darth Maul was known for his aggressive fighting style and his slaughter of Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. However, having been abandoned by his master Darth Sidious following the events of the Phantom Menace, he emerged a decade later at the height of the Clone Wars. Masterless and with no tremendous power, what takes him from nothing to the events taking place in Solo, a Star Wars story? That and more we'll cover on today's video. This is Marcos and welcome to the video. I'm going to give a little bit of backstory into Maul's reappearance in the Clone Wars, so if you're already familiar, just go ahead and skip to the timestamp on the screen, but if not, you're welcome to stick around. Alright, so let's dive into this. In the episode titled Monster, depicted in Season 3 of the Clone Wars TV show, we see Dooku looking for an apprentice to replace Asajj Ventress after his master, Darth Sidious, commanded him to dispose of her. Savage Opress is introduced to fulfill this role, and early on we are brought to the understanding that this is a brother of Darth Maul, and, well, he's quickly taken advantage of by Ventress in a plot to assassinate Count Dooku, which, of course, ultimately fails. I think that if their cohesion as a pair was more in sync, and it wasn't just Ventress fueled by hate and a somewhat confused Savage, that they could have stood a fair chance against Dooku. However, Dooku's experience far exceeded their combined in almost every sense of the Force, as well as lightsaber mastery. Savage Opress is oftentimes referred to as a monster, mostly due to his brute strength and impulsive nature in the Force. However, he lacks the skill needed to effectively channel it into useful power. Once we leave Season 3, we fast forward all the way to the end of Season 4, which personally is a large enough gap to pick up a story from, but anyways. This starts us off with Savage following this Night Sister magic compass thingy, which eventually leads him to his brother Maul. Now, this is a big moment in Star Wars, especially in the lore. I mean, up to this point, other than the Legends continuity of comics, we hadn't seen many people survive extremely harsh injuries with a lightsaber. Maul had not figuratively, but literally, been cut in half at the end of the Phantom Menace. I think that the in-lore explanation for his survival is pretty cool, and fits in line with what we know about the dark side and its influence on those who choose its path. Maul was able to survive on this pure hatred alone for Kenobi and the master who abandoned him. Now, this combined with the physical aspect of his injuries left his mind twisted, a shell of his former self, as we can see when Savage encounters him for the first time. He's muttering, almost indiscernibly, to himself. Luckily for Maul, Savage takes him back to Mother Talzin on Dathomir, where she is able to restore both his mind and body, allowing him to pursue his revenge on the Jedi, specifically Kenobi. This path of revenge leads us into Season 5, with the first episode titled Revival. Still hell-bent on exacting his revenge on Kenobi, the pair find themselves recruiting pirates on Florum, and rather forcibly at that. This leads to a conflict where Jedi Master Adi Gallia loses her life to Savage, and in turn Savage loses his arm to Kenobi, forcing the brothers to flee, only to be stranded, as we later see them rescued by the Death Watch, a, quote, terrorist group of Mandalorians whose objective was to replace the current pacifist regime, which was put in place by Duchess Satine of Mandalore. The now self-proclaimed Sith Lords work hand in hand with the Death Watch in order to secure the planet of Mandalore. However, this is ultimately Maul's way of getting at Kenobi, right? Utilizing the now captured Duchess as a pawn in order to lure Kenobi to Mandalore. Leading up to the capturing of Mandalore, this new alliance between Darth Maul and Pre Vizsla facilitates the creation of what is often referred to as the Shadow Collective. This is essentially a collection of the crime syndicates scattered across the galaxy, including the Crimson Dawn, Black Sun, the Hutt Cartel, and even the Pikes, along, of course, with the Death Watch, but they're not technically a syndicate. The Shadow Collective would go and play out several scenarios across the capital of Mandalore, propping up the Death Watch as heroes of people, if you will, willing to do what it takes to protect the Mandalore against the villainous crime syndicates. Once they see that the people of Mandalore are on their side is kind of when things get a bit tricky. See, Maul never intended to let Pre Vizsla rule Mandalore. No, he was just using him as a means to gain power. The two end up duking it out in a battle to the death in order to determine who has the right to rule Mandalore and wield the Darksaber. Maul clearly wins. I mean, he's only at the simple disadvantage that Pre Vizsla uses a couple weapons specifically designed to combat Force users, but, you know, he kind of gets the Dooku treatment in the end. Okay, so now we're at the point where, spoiler alert, Maul kind of kills Satine at the beginning of the episode, the Lawless, in order to make Kenobi suffer, which, I mean, this moment is heartbreaking. We know that these two had a connection. We can infer as much from Obi-Wan's words words in the episode Voyage of Temptation during Season 2, and I quote, "Master Qui-Gon and I spent a year on Mandalore, protecting the Duchess from an insurgent who had threatened her world. They sent bounty hunters after us. We were always on the run, living hand to mouth, never sure what the next day would bring." End quote. At the peak of the climax in this episode, the following conversation ensues between Satine and Obi-Wan, and I quote, "Obi-Wan, it looks like I may never see you again. I don't know quite how to say this, but I've loved you from the moment you came to my aid all those years ago." And Obi-Wan responds, "Satine, this is hardly the time or place for it," he says as he notices her desperation. Obi-Wan resumes speaking, saying, "All right, had you said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order." End quote. This clearly shows us that the pair have currently, or at least one of them had, feelings for each other, which makes this scene all the more shattering. Despite losing one of the people he cared for most in the galaxy, Obi-Wan stood strong, not giving into his hatred. I mean, he could simply have just started attacking Maul in that moment, like, fallen to the dark side, but it just broke him, which was what Maul intended. During this same episode, Bo-Katan, Satine's sister, rescues the Jedi Master, and as they make their escape, Maul and Savage get a visit from Santa Claus, Palpatine, and he's here to tell them that they're on his naughty list. Yeah, but no, in all seriousness, the Shadow Collective that Maul and his brother put together had begun to grow in such wealth and power that their influence started to present itself as a threat to Sidious's overall plan. He therefore set out to neutralize them, and what ensued in an epic 2v1 lightsaber battle. I believe that Palpatine is simply enjoying himself here, contending with Master Yoda in Revenge of the Sith. This Lord of the Sith mess around as if they were his playthings, finishing off Savage before rendering Maul unable to fight through the use of a couple powerful force pushes into this beautiful mural and back into the floor before cooking him alive with the Force lightning that he would later use on Luke on the second Death Star. After the Lawless, we don't see Maul again until Season 7 of the Clone Wars during the Siege of Mandalore arc. A lot of fans, however, get confused as to how he appears back on Mandalore if Palpatine captured him, stating that he had, quote, other uses for him. This story, however, only appears in a comic miniseries adapted by Dark Horse, where Palpatine imprisons Maul in a separatist prison named the Spire, with the goal of using the renegade Sith Lord to lead him to Mother Talzin, deeming Talzin a threat to the Sith securing power to rule the galaxy. Maul escapes with the help of Gar Saxon and Rook Kast, two Mandalorians from his Death Watch. They regroup on the planet Zambar, only to be attacked by a separatist army led by Grievous. Barely escaping the battle, Palpatine's plans begin to unfold as Maul seeks out Talzin for help. I don't want to get too deep into the comics as there are 4 of them and I feel I just wouldn't do them justice to quickly summarize them. You guys should definitely give them a read, but essentially Maul and the Mandalorians manage to capture Dooku in another battle on the planet of Ord Mantell, and he uses Dooku as a sacrificial pawn to help Mother Talzin drain life force from Dooku in order to regain her physical form. Palpatine and Grievous arrive and another battle breaks out, which ends in the death of Mother Talzin and Maul escaping. Palpatine decides that Maul is of no concern and therefore leaves him be, as he is truly only considered Talzin at that point to be any threat. With Maul's Shadow Collective left in ruins, he returns to Mandalore, only for that to be left in ruins as well, as we see in the last arc of the Clone Wars TV show. After this last episode, however, in the Clone Wars, the Empire is basically born, and from this point until we see him again at the end of Solo, Maul has really been in the shadows, pulling the strings of the major crime syndicates in the galaxy, including of course Crimson Dawn, but also the Black Sun, as we see him make an appearance in the Bad Batch while the group visits the planet Ord Mantell, making an appearance in the Season 7 episode Together Again, where he appears to be threatening a Pike. That being said, he mainly focused on using Crimson Dawn to destabilize the Empire and presume control of the galaxy, something his successor Kira would be nearly much more successful at after his death at the hands of Obi-Wan on Tatooine. Alright, that's all we really have for today's episode, and if you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. See y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.